Everything you need to know about the Vigo Dem Party. So sit back, relax, and watch from anywhere. Get ready for a chat with the chair.
I'm Joe Etling, Chair of the Vigo County Democratic Central Committee, and welcome to the award-winning Chat with the Chair. We are so delighted you could join us. We have got an awesome show tonight. Hope everyone is doing great out there in our viewing world. Appreciate you tuning in with us. Hope that you like us, share us, and do all the other things in your social media accounts that you're able to do legally and ethically. And we are so delighted that you can join us. And wait till you hear from our next viewer, or next guest rather. He is a legend in the Chat with the Chair. We are so delighted he came back to visit with us. I thought maybe I scared him off last time he was here, but he is a trooper. So remind our viewers who you are.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jim Turner. I'm a family physician. I'm also a Democrat precinct committeeman. I'm also the son of a Democrat county chairman.
You sure are. Now, Dr. Turner, you have been a very gracious guest with the chat and been always very informative and just doing a tremendous job to keep our viewers informed. Been some updates in your situation since your last visit. Talk to our viewers about what's going on for Dr. Jim Turner.
Well, I also serve, as you may know, as the president of the Vigo County Board of Health.
Yes, I do.
I've been on the Board of Health for about 6 years and president for the last couple of years. And I don't know if most people knew, because you wouldn't probably have known about it. There wasn't much in the press, but the governor did organize a public health commission. And this is the report that just came out about 10 days ago. It's about 70 pages of recommendations. Had a group of about 25 experts around the state to serve on this commission. They also had, I think, about 5 local fact-finding visits. They did not come to Terre Haute, but went to 5 other cities around the state so citizens could put their input on public health. So I just highlighted a few issues of the 70-page report. The good thing about it is there are very sound recommendations for all the things that we're behind on, but Indiana.
Now our team here, as you can imagine, Doctor, you know what a crack crew we have here on the chat.
Nothing but the best.
So they, I think, have broken this down for me, but before I have my analysis shared, we thought it might be helpful if you could kind of share your analysis with the Health Commission's findings, if you would.
Sure.
Be so gracious.
I'm going to start off with 2 quotes because I like quotes.
You do like quotes.
The first one was from Thomas Jefferson. Without health, there is no happiness, and attention to health then should take the place of every other object. And then by John Adams said, this is sort of interesting, I think. The smell of the midnight lamp is very unwholesome. Never defraud yourself of sleep nor your walk.
Good advice.
So there's
Very
250-year-old advice.
Write those down, absolutely.
Yeah. So I kind of, this was kind of broken up into different sections. I just got some different highlights. But, and I'm just going to kind of go through them as I have them kind of highlighted, and we can talk about them later. One is that the life expectancy in Indiana has actually dropped. And in 2010, our life expectancy was 77.5 years. But now it has dropped to 77. It places us places us 40th in the nation of longevity. There's also a huge disparity on longevity depending on where you live. Whether you live in rural areas, your life expectancy is up to as much as 8 years less than living in a city. Wow. What it says here, the disparity of life expectancy between Indiana counties can be stark. The county with the highest life expectancy has 9 more years average than the county with the lowest expectancy. This is pretty much the rural areas where they suffer the most. So I want to kind of touch that point.
Am I able to interrupt you there?
Sure, I want you to.
That's that's something that affects everybody here.
Of course it does.
I got to check my calendar, in fact, here. Got me worried here, Doc.
Sure.
But what do you attribute that change to?
Well, throughout this whole theme, Indiana does not have enough healthcare providers. I was in a room when I helped develop the Indiana University's rural medicine program, which now is, I think, about the 18th year. And those young people come to Terre Haute. We have 24 of them come here every year. The new group just came. These young folks They're accepting, the School of Medicine, I've mentioned this number before, accepting 350 students, 7,000 applications.
Wow.
So they're very bright, and we get 24 of them here every year. So the rural medicine has come to fruition, and the young people who graduate through the rural medicine program, right now 80% are still going into rural Indiana, but we're still markedly underserved, particularly when it comes to obstetrics and other things like that. So we're making a little bit of progress, but still we don't rank very well. Actually, when you look at, when you rank Indiana's public health system, in 1991, America's Health Ranking placed Indiana 26th in the nation for overall health outcomes. The trend has been downward since that time. Now Indiana is ranked 41st
Wow.
in healthcare outcomes. So we have dropped over the last 20 years in our generalized public health.
That's not good.
It's not good at all. That's why I wanted to bring it to your attention.
Absolutely. We want to highlight that here on the chat.
Yes.
And so I assume that disparity, even within the state of Indiana, from the metropolitan to the rural, once again applies to the lack of health care.
Exactly. Another interesting thing about Indiana is when you look at, this is from U.S. News and World Report, when you look at quality of life rankings, Indiana does pretty good on quality of life. 6th in affordability, 7th in opportunity, growth 19th in the nation, public safety 25th, natural environment 48. We're kind of a flat state.
Wow.
So we rank 32nd. When you put in public health measures, mental health, we rank 35th worst in the nation. Infant mortality 38th, adult mortality 41st, obesity 40th, smoking 41st, suicide we're 13. So Indiana's overall public health ranking, we're 40th out of 50 states. So the numbers are not good.
No.
And that's what I want to kind of highlight for your team. Indiana has somewhat of a decentralized public health care system. We have 94 county health departments.
Okay.
And they don't necessarily work together. We have difficulty sharing data between counties and so forth, and we saw that a lot during COVID. So having our kind of a system, there are some advantages to it. The one advantage of having a local health department is there's local credibility, local physical presence, they're in your town, established relationships with community stakeholders like your hospitals and clinics, able to be more responsive, and particularly a quicker response time. But the disadvantages of having our health department as we have it, and this was a major one, county councils often lack understanding of public health.
Mm.
So if they don't understand public health and how it works, things don't go very well. Inconsistent availability of resources, inconsistent enforcement and messaging, and less ability to respond to emergency and growing needs. So the county councils and the county boards, they control the purse strings, and if they don't understand how that system works, it doesn't work very well.
Mm-hmm.
So another little thing there too, Joe, would be that what we spend in Indiana on healthcare dollars. 2020, the CDC per capita grant funding for people in New Jersey, they spend $18 per person in New Jersey, up to $209 for the District of Columbia. State of Indiana ranks last. We rank 50th, just above New Jersey, at $18 that we spend per person compared to what the District of Columbia spends $209 per person. So when you put all these numbers together from the Health Services Administration Act and so forth like that, our overall we've improved a little bit, but we're still ranking between the 40th and 50th ranking in what we fund public health in the state. You generally, like your mom and dad taught us, you get what you pay for. Mm-hmm. Using the so the final note was, using the Census Bureau and the state expenditures for the 49 and 50 states, excluding California, we were 45th for the state government helping with state with public health expenditures.
So would those expenditures be more tied to state dollars or local dollars or a combination?
I was actually surprised when I looked. That brings me to that question. I was actually surprised when you look at the little pie graph. Actually, 68% of our healthcare dollars for public health come from the federal government.
Wow.
I was surprised. The state general fund, 1%. Other obligations, 8%. There's a tobacco fund we get some money from. But the feds supply a great deal of our local health funding. And that, I might mention that now, but one thing we don't do a good job at all, there are a lot of grant dollars available for different type of projects. At the Lugar Center, we have some outstanding grant dollars, and since the Lugar Center started, we pulled in over $20 million in grants. Some of you may have heard our most recent one was a $6 million grant for mother baby programs, because our infant mortality is very high. Our infant mortality is worse than over 30 nations. Some nations you would not believe that we have a worse maternal health outcome. So when you
I think
look
our
at
viewers probably know, but why don't you just remind them about the Lugar Center?
the Lugar Center is an innovation center. It's nonpartisan. It began at Union Hospital, then it was called the Midwest Center for Rural Health, and the idea was to try to get more young physicians into rural Indiana. We modeled it somewhat after the University of Illinois had a program that had been going on for 20 years, encouraging young rural folks, and actually developed a whole different path for them to get to medical school and get to rural areas. We developed a pipeline, and it actually starts, Joe, when you were in high school. And for young people who are interested in medicine, if they have a certain GPA and a certain test score going to college, their ACT score, they can get involved in a program at Indiana State. And if they get into that rural medicine program at Indiana State, they pay no tuition. They also have extra encouragement through that 4 years. They get shadowing opportunities with physicians and so forth. So they can graduate from that program, go on to Indiana University, and that's all in Terre Haute. The Indiana University Rural Program is based in Terre Haute, so they can stay here 8 years, and then theoretically could even go into our family medicine residency and theoretically stay here for 11 years. Those are the kind of people you want here to stay for 11 years. Mm-hmm. And ideally, if you do that, they will stay here and settle here. So we
Permanently.
Permanently. So there's a pipeline set up, and we have a handful of physicians in Terre Haute practicing right now who came through that pipeline, who started off in high school.
And you've been very instrumental and integral part of that. Why?
Well, the need was great, obviously, and I love to see. I've had a wonderful 33-year career in rural medicine. It's a great career, and but the young people in these programs are rural young people. When we interview them, we're looking for 4-H, what their background is. Are they going to go back? And the challenge, as I mentioned to you maybe before in this group before, you also have to recruit the spouse, because by then most of them have gotten married. They're 26, 27 years old. If you're from Clay City, but your wife's from Carmel, you're probably not going to Clay City. So the spouse plays, or vice versa. As I mentioned before also, half the medical school class is women now. Compared to the turn of the century, zero.
Wow.
Literally zero. So you have to find a job for the spouse also, because they tend to be well educated and so forth too. So for a small town to find a career for that other spouse, that can be somewhat of a difficult thing. And like you and I have, Joe, we've been married long enough, we do whatever our spouses tell us. Right?
Exactly.
I've had 44 years of marital bliss, and I do whatever she does. So you gotta.
He knows he's on camera. It's all.
Yeah. She'll see it later. So anyway, we developed a pathway, because the rural physician is not just providing health care, but they are job creators. The average rural physician creates 22 jobs. Your office staff, home health, hospice. You don't have a nursing home in that community if you don't have a physician. So we're job creators, and good job creators. The people in our office all have hospital benefits, healthcare benefits, they have a retirement plan and so forth. So you need those rural jobs. Somebody brings in 20-some jobs in a small town, that's a big deal. So there's so many positives to getting a physician in your community. But the other issue, as I mentioned before, you can't just recruit one. You got to recruit 3. Mm-hmm. They got to have some weekends off. They can't work every day, every weekend. You'll burn them out.
Right.
So for a small community to try to recruit 2 to 3 physicians, it's not easy.
Big job.
You know. And we look at these outcomes, the need is great. When you look at our total state funding, and we look at what the total state funding is for public health, this goes through workup for birth defects, chronic disease, environmental health, HIV/AIDS, occupational health. Look at the whole list. Our total state funding is $125 million. Again, that comes down to per capita, $18, places us 50th in the nation. So our state legislature is not funding public. We're last. We should be ashamed of that. We're last in public health. And that costs a lot of money. You know, employers don't want to come to when you're ranked 50th.
No.
If your employees aren't healthy, they don't want to come.
No.
So it hurts you in so many different ways. So one thing would probably help our local health departments would be if you had hire a grant writer to go after some of these, particularly these federal grants. Now, we've had opportunities on the health department. Well, I know I was personally involved where we had some nice opportunities for extra vaccines and some different things like that, that the grants would have covered everything, including a full-time employee. Well, the grants were like, most of them come out for 2 to 3 years. And a lot of times the county council would say, we're not hiring anybody. Even though their salary was paid, you know, it was a 2 or 3 year grant. What's going to happen at the end of this time? Are we going to have to pick up an FTE? And we never got the grants. They wouldn't let us pursue them.
Well,
so there's opportunities out there because the grant dollars are out there. You just have to have people know how to go after them.
So, of course, there may be some things that you might want to be ranked last in, but that's not one of them. So do you think that shedding light on that might cause the people at the State House to take some action?
I hope so. You know, the thing is, this came out about 3 weeks ago. I've seen nothing in the local papers, or even I don't watch the Indianapolis papers that closely, but on the positive side, I don't have time to go into those. There are some nice recommendations,
Okay.
but the great majority of the recommendations require cash. Every one of them, the theme that goes through all of them, underfunded, underfunded, underfunded.
So that would be there's some grants or that politicians are going to have to decide we're going to commit state dollars to it.
Well, some people say, do we give the taxpayers $200 or refund public health? What would be more advantageous? Because public health affects everybody.
Sure.
So that may be a simple answer, but there was millions of dollars in that, as well as what it costs to put the checks out and send them out and so forth. But it's just a thought. It's not a priority, Joe. That's the problem. It's not a priority, even though for every reason it should be. But hopefully, you got to commend the governor for getting these people together,
Yes.
and then to put together this really sound, led by Dr. Chris Box, a Terre Haute South graduate.
Terre Haute South graduate.
So we have one of our local people who was very instrumental in getting this done. So I guess the first thing is really develop a white paper and hopefully shock some people with the numbers and say, gosh, can we do better than that?
And is this a first of its kind in the state?
To my knowledge, it is. I'm going to touch on a couple other things if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you guys have time?
No, we've got all the time.
Okay.
This is very important. We want to bring attention here since, as you indicate,
Sure.
mainstream media hasn't hit on this. So here on the chat, we want to bring attention to it.
You're always on the cutting edge
We're on
anyway.
the cutting edge
You know,
here. Crack Crew, we want to get our viewers talking about
Sure,
this
sure.
with people so that we can get some action here.
another thing I'll mention briefly was about the challenge with our trauma system. Even though we made some improvement, our trauma system is still what we look at today. We saw it here in our community. The number one cause of death, age 1 to 44 in the United States, is trauma. Injury is America's most expensive disease, costing us about $180 million a year. So trauma is a huge issue. The problem that's happened, though, is, Joe, we don't have enough ambulances, paramedics, and EMTs in this state. In Indiana, EMS runs have almost doubled to 750,000 in 2018. However, the number of ambulances that provide this have dropped from 107. I'm sorry, let me get my number right. From 179,000 5 years ago, we only have 1,200 now. Excuse me. We had 1,700 ambulances. Now we have 1,200. So we've lost 500 ambulances in the last 5 years. The number of paramedics and EMTs has declined from 24,000 in 2018 to 23,000. So in just a short number of years, we have 500 fewer ambulances helping the state out, and we're losing our EMTs and paramedics.
Why is that? Why is the need for those, and why is that so important?
Well, you know, the county councils have some role in this too, because they allow county contracts to certain ambulance providers.
Sure. And
that depends how that all goes and how many there are and how much competition there is and so forth like that. I'm actually the medical director of the Ivy Tech's paramedic program. I have been for probably 20 years. I'm an old medic, you might remember myself. Yes. Worked the streets for 5 years. So that we've had some paramedic class is hard. It's a 2-year, you're dealing with over 20 medications, you're defibrillating people, you're intubating. people fail the class, and people fail the national exam. Actually, Ivy Tech's had a great program, and our pass rate's quite high, over 90%, but there's nothing easy about paramedic school. But the bottom line is, Joe, we don't pay enough. We don't pay paramedics or EMT nearly enough for what they do. I know, because I lived the life. You're out there at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's raining, it's icy, it's dangerous, people get hurt, you hurt your back. There's nothing easy about it. And not only you have to do the academic part, but when the time comes, you've been on your feet for 20-some hours, and you're out there for the physical part, and people die. The emotional part of it. You're going to see everything. You're going to see what they just happened in Terre Haute the other night. You're going to be involved with children who die, with sudden infant death syndrome. You're going to pull up on all kinds of things, house fires. Not uncommonly, you take it home with you. It's not for everybody. It's a pretty tough job, but there's no doubt we are not paying the people nearly what they need to be paid. Let me tell you a quick story. When I became Decatur, Illinois' first paramedic, and we had a private ambulance service, ran the whole county, 160,000 people. When we became medics, our boss doubled what he charged for ambulance runs, but didn't pay us anything more. When he was on vacation, we all got together and petitioned the National Labor Relations Board to petition the Teamsters to represent us. When our boss came back, he freaking died. So anyway, we won the election 11-1. I was elected as a steward. We negotiated the first paramedic contract. Our Teamster business agent, 6'4", about this much bark on him, rolled up shirt sleeves, was a classic guy, but smart. He contacted the National and asked, we need a sample, do you have a sample paramedic contract? They had none. 24-hour shifts, things like that, they didn't have contracts. We became the first paramedic Teamster contract in the nation. Wow. After we got it all negotiated, our boss finally, we got it all done. Jimmy Hoffa was still running the show then. So after it was all said and done, my first son was born on, we had medical, dental, and vision on Teamster insurance. What our boss found out a few months later, we got the word that the provider in Springfield, Illinois was going to come to Decatur. So we all went down to the Teamster, all me and the boss. And so our business agent calls the guy on the phone. We're sitting there quietly. He said, I understand you may be coming to Decatur to open your business. He said, we're considering. He said, we represent the paramedics here. We'll be happy to sign you up as soon as you show up in town. He never came. And our boss said, it kind of works both ways. So what the other thing would happen was he was able to hire better people because we had a better, and you know what, Joe? It's still there today. Is that right? They're Teamsters today, 35 years later. So it can be done, whether it was organized labor, however, but these guys and women, a lot of women out there too on the street, in my day we had to lift everybody up. Now they have collapsible cots, so women can go on calls because they're not lifting that 300-pound guy up on an icy street. So our EMS system is failing. We don't have enough horses to run the operation. If you gave a good living wage, they would be out there because it takes a special person to be a medic and an EMT, and they love what they do, but you got to pay them. They got to make the house payment. Right. And if you're going to expect all that out of them, then give them a living wage and a benefit package so they can take care of us.
And that first responder is so important oftentimes because time is so critical on those trauma calls.
It's called the golden hour, is what it's called. And if you don't get something, we learned that in Vietnam, and that's how we got into helicopter technology, was because of what happened in Vietnam. And now we lifeline people because that golden hour, once you're in shock, you're in trouble. And at first, getting treated right off the bat. So when you look at what's our leading cause of death in this age group, 1 to 44, and it's trauma, and we're losing 500 ambulances in the last 5 years. A number of medics have dropped. There's room for improvement there, that's for sure.
What kind of recommendations are coming from the commission?
They all have to do with funding. That we need to hire more people to work in our health departments, beef up our contracts, maybe our local ambulance providers, make them more where they can pay their people more, make sure they're doing that to pay them. There are some scholarship type programs available for healthcare workers in a wide range. They're part of the National Health Service Corps, and those programs have been around really since the 1960s. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember, but when doctors used to get out of medical school in the 60s, they went to Indian reservations. Remember people doing that sort of thing? And that was the start of this. They would pay your tuition off if you went to an Indian reservation. And the idea was if you stayed 2 or 3 years, you might like it and stay. Mm-hmm. And that program is still available. So the National Service Corps, if we utilize it more, go after it, it's almost like writing a grant. We could probably get a lot more young providers in the state and get their loans paid for if they stay.
So the thought you believe with this Public Health Commission issuing the report is for their reaction?
you're gonna have to, I think, awareness and action. Awareness of the public, because most people don't know what's in this. Right now, Indiana ranks 29th in the nation for overall child well-being. Are we happy with 29th? I don't think so. The state is ranked 36th for health, dropping from 35th in 2020. The leading cause among Hoosier children aged 1 to 19 is accidents. Suicide is number 2. So we just witnessed accidents in our community last night. The third leading cause of death is overdose. So all things that are preventable. And the one issue that talks about, a lot of people don't know, that we struggle in getting school nurses at our school system. And the main reason is we don't pay them enough. Okay. Our school nurses are not paid by the state of Indiana. They're paid by your local school board, your local, and it kind of depends how they rate them. Sometimes they rate them as this, school nurses are typically classified by school corporations as support versus certified staff. This contributes to low pay, further exacerbating school nurse shortages. So schools, if you want to get someone with some good experience, you got to compete with what the hospitals are paying. Because particularly the hospitals are going to have a shift differential, maybe a little bit more to work evening, night shift. They're going to have a good benefit package. If you're not going to pay that school nurse that, you're not going to get them. Mm-hmm. No matter how many they love children, they want to be there because their kids are in school. But we're doing a very poor job getting school nurses and paying them well. And there's a close relationship between health and education. Healthy students are better learners. So we know that when kids come to school and we feed them now for breakfast or lunch or whatever, we know a child with an empty stomach is not going to learn. Also an unhealthy child is not going to learn who has no access to health care. So getting school nurses at all of our schools, many of our school districts around the state have part-time nurses and so forth like that. There's nobody there to go to the nurses station. There's a similar type thing also with the behavioral health, school counselors, and where we kind of rank at that. And when our kids come to school and they're troubled, we all say, well, take them to the counselor. Do we have school counselors? The recommendation by the National Association of Psychologists recommends that we have one school counselor for every 250 students. Indiana has one for every 700. So we're twice worse than what the national recommendation is. When you don't have when a child comes to school with a problem, and we're staffing less than 1/2 the recommendation of our professional organizations, we're not doing a good job. So I just picked out some of the highlights, and it's all here, 70 pages. You could probably get online, the Governor's Public Health Commission, and get it all. Joe and I are old enough, we like things printed out.
That is for sure.
We don't read online.
But I would have to, though, say you have summarized that extremely well, but I'm not sure I would call those highlights. I mean, they almost seem like lowlights.
Well, you gotta thank Dr. Box and the governor. Really, someone pushed this.
Yes.
A lot of people didn't want this door opened, probably because the numbers are so poor. So a lot of people didn't want light shed on this. But
this is a significant issue, without a doubt.
It touches all of us. I mean,
Yes.
From our industry that wants to come here to well-being of our children. We all want our kids to grow up and be well and get educated properly. Our EMS system, our nursing system, our healthcare system, we're in trouble. We could do so much better. If we have surpluses, there's places to fill it. Okay,
Now,
but the question is, what's the priority? It's always, what's the priority for somebody, and who's going to be the champion? Who's going to be the champion for this public health?
Well, we think we got a champion right here. I mean, you've been such a visible part of the medical community, and you've been so also involved in politics since you were a young man, and so it has seemed that's evolved from being a kitchen table issue to one that's way down the list as far as that office holders and politicians are talking about.
But when you take the time, and I'm sorry I might have been a little clumsy with it, but when you take the time to go through the whole thing, the recommendations are, I think, very reasonable, but they all involve cash. And whether it's cash for scholarships to bring students in, whatever we need to build up our workforce, because we don't have enough providers in this state for hardly anything medically. Our long-term care facilities are struggling to hire people. We're lower. We don't have enough physicians in the community. We don't have enough mid-level PAs, nurse practitioners. One of the hardest jobs in healthcare are CNAs, certified nurse assistants who work in a nursing home. That's a hard job at 2 o'clock in the morning taking care of folks.
But we're not talking just about somebody seeking the presidency or running for U.S. Senate or Congress. We're talking about people running school board,
exactly,
for county council, right up the list.
So I'd like to see the school board candidates say, "What's your thoughts on school nurses?
Okay.
What do you think? What do you think? What do you think the school nurses get? Tell me what you know about school nurses and let me know what their salary is and what the average floor nurse salary is, RN, and so let's see where you're at. Do some homework, do some research.
So as you say, we got to champion that, and our viewers would be excellent sources
Sure.
of.
Yeah, but when you go to a meeting or a fundraiser or a open house, ask that candidate. Tell me about the healthcare situation for our children in our school district. Do we have enough behavioral health providers? According to the state, we do not. How do we do with our school nurses? Do we have plenty of school nurses? Are we paying them a comparable wage that the rest of the community has and benefit package? The answer is no. So,
And of course, we've got county council candidates on the ballot.
Yes,
as well.
and so they need to research the public health issues because they're real and they're right in front of us. The numbers are right there.
That affects us all. So we also, of course, talked about, you've been great coming in the past talking about COVID and the numbers in Vigo County specifically. I know that that's a topic that people are trying to get off their mind, but it's still here. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, I just brought the statistics today. Let me just tell you what's out there today. We're still testing 100,000 positives. This is nationwide. 100,000 positive cases per day, and that's 19% lower than it was 2 weeks ago. The number of people hospitalized is dropping. The majority of people in the hospital now with COVID have other comorbidities, other illnesses. We have very few people. We have nobody on a ventilator in Terre Haute. We haven't anybody on a ventilator in 6 months. So the COVID that's out there now, the variants, and I just left, we saw about 20 people positive today.
In Vigo County.
It's headache, body ache, sore throat, nasal congestion, but it's not the pulmonary things we saw before. A year and a half ago, we looked at an x-ray, it looked like ground glass, and those people are going to end up on ventilators. It's not hitting the lungs like what we saw a year and a half ago. So people are surviving, but they're still pretty darn sick, and you don't want to have it. I mean, it still makes you sick and you lose time, and the CDC's recommended at least a 5-day quarantine, so you're missing work or missing school. But we're going to see another little bump as the school-age children, because we're seeing kids that are positive. I saw a 3-year-old today. But interestingly, the children tend to do well, and this variant, but it doesn't tell us what the next variant could be like. It could be pulmonary again.
So the kids getting back to school just...
Sure, it always has been. The same thing with influenza over the years. When it goes to the school kids first, and they bring it home.
Right.
I saw that in practice for years. But we did have, still having 500 deaths per day nationwide from COVID. So it's again another serious issue, and it should not be something that should divide our country. It should bring our country together, just like World War I, World War II brought our country together. A pandemic should bring us together, not divided our nation. That doesn't make any sense at all.
But it seems to continue to divide us, though.
It does, and it doesn't really make any sense. And so the vaccines are there; they're free. We also now have a new tool, medicine. Some of you heard of Paxlovid. It's an oral medication. We're giving it out every day. It's an antiviral medicine. Something like if you had shingles, you would get an antiviral medicine. It's not this monoclonal antibody, but it's pills you take twice a day for 5 days, and it really tends to shorten the course of it, help you keep you out of the hospital. Our president took it when he was sick. Dr. Fauci took it. So it's available for people unless they have serious liver or kidney disease, but otherwise we're offering to them over age 18, not if you're pregnant. But we have it in stock. Our tax dollars have paid for it. And so many providers around the nation have it, so people leave our office with it in their hand. So there's we have another tool out there.
Another condition that there have been discussion about, and it may have existed before, but now it's on people's mind, is monkeypox.
Sure.
What can you tell our viewers about that?
We had a case of monkeypox in Terre Haute about 10 years ago, and I went up and actually saw the person out of curiosity. They were kind enough to let me take a look. It's actually kind of a cousin to smallpox, which when you look at the greatest killers of all time, it's a little battle between the Black Plague, historically, smallpox, which was eradicated in the early 1960s, is not on the earth any longer, and malaria. And malaria is still killing 1 million people a year, mainly children. So malaria, the deaths are still going up from that. But these are 3 major killers through history. So monkeypox is actually related to smallpox, and the vaccine is actually a vaccine that was designed for smallpox that's been used for monkeypox. But it's primarily among homosexual men. That's what we've seen nationwide in that community. So it really hasn't jumped to the general community very much. They've also had some challenges, and I don't think, to my knowledge, anyone has died from monkeypox. You can get, kind of like smallpox, you can get a kind of a crusty, generalized rash that's pretty bad. Sometimes it's more localized, but it can kind of cover your whole body. If you've ever seen old pictures of smallpox, how terrible that disease was. But you know, we developed a vaccine, and World Health Organization grabbed it, and people went worldwide and vaccinated the world. And we've done almost the same thing with polio, but there are a couple pockets of polio still in the world, mainly in Afghanistan, where terrorists, or whoever you want to say, will not allow healthcare workers to come in and vaccinate their tribe because they have all kinds of crazy stories that they might make a male impotent or whatever. And so there's still some little hidden pockets of polio. But when I was a boy, 1952 was the largest outbreak of polio in this country. And my mom would have had 4 children at that time, me being a baby, World War II baby boomers, and that was the #1 killer at that time. 1952 was the biggest killer and if you look around your communities, some of the older folks, you may find somebody with a limp or a withered limb. We all kind of know somebody maybe like that had polio as a child, and that got eliminated by a vaccine.
So is monkeypox something prevalent in Vigo County?
I don't think we've had a positive case yet, to my knowledge, from what the Board of Health our administrators have told me. And I'm actually the chairman of the Infection Control Committee at the hospital, so I haven't heard anything. So everybody's kind of on the lookout.
Okay.
But it doesn't spread. We're not going to see it hit the community because COVID spread by cough, by droplet.
So what other things do you see for our viewers on the horizon as we're winding the summer down to the fall and then the winter?
I've been so positive so far, Joe.
It has been really uplifting.
I don't know what to add that's going to get everybody all fired up and enlightened. But 5 years ago, we'd be concerned about the flu season.
Yes.
Because the number of people who would die from influenza, thousands, nationwide and so forth like that. As you know, what's amazing, the flu numbers have just dropped off to almost nothing. Is it the mask? Maybe. Is it the vaccines? Maybe. But certainly masking was something different that we've never done before. So some people may argue, well, maybe we should mask during the flu season, for influenza. Did that really make a difference? I mean, the cases just dropped to just amazingly down. But they'll be coming up. The new flu vaccine is done every fall. And as you may know, they kind of survey the world. And right now they're having a kind of a pretty big burst in Australia of their influenza. And that's sometimes a marker for us. So they're getting a pretty big boost in influenza. So what the CDC does, and the World Health Organization, they survey the world and try to find out what's the 3 most likely strains of influenza virus will come to America. And that's why they called it trivalent or triple. That means 3, Joe. Trivalent.
I'm writing that down.
Counselor, I wanted to help the counselor out here a little bit.
Is that in Latin or?
Yeah, of course it is. Took 4 years of it. So anyway, the trivalent. So there's 3 different.
They said Latin's a dead language. It's killing me over here.
Yeah, I'm setting him up. But so anyway, the 3 most likely strains will be put into our vaccine, and they call it a trivalent vaccine. So that hasn't come out yet. I don't think they've decided exactly what's most likely to hit here. But we're going to encourage everybody again to get. We don't know what's going to happen, to get the flu vaccine when it comes available. It's been it's not been a perfect vaccine, but 50-60% effective. We find out about the vaccine months after the flu season is over, and they have to do studies backwards and see, well, how well did we do? Picking those 3 vaccines, how well did we do? So it's kind of made backwards.
So the people that are out there that have been vaccinated and boosters for COVID, we're still recommending,
of course,
an influenza vaccine.
Right. Just because they're viruses, it's still a different disease, and with a high mortality in certain populations, particularly the elderly. And we have to go back 100 years, but the great influenza of 1918 killed more people than all the battles in World War I.
So what's the future look like, you think, with regard to COVID? To those people who have been vaccinated, boosted, what would be the future for them? Will they receive another vaccination?
I think they're going to try to. It really goes back, Joe, to the nature of viruses. As I've said before here, some people don't even know if a virus is even alive because it does not use oxygen, it cannot reproduce on its own, and it doesn't use sugar. And so the question is a virus even a live thing, or is it just some type of a particle? So, and it also changes and mutates. We've seen this with COVID. So we're always going to be on the outlook, but what they're trying to develop is sort of a universal vaccine that with one vaccine would catch all these different variants in influenza and COVID. Mm-hmm. And we have some really smart people working on it, Nobel Prize people working on that idea because it means so much, around the world.
Sure.
So I think we'll just have to watch the progress through the pharmaceutical companies, through research, our university institutions. There's some brilliant people working on these ideas. So we made some good progress. We developed a vaccine very quickly, and I think follow the science. I think is what
But
you
the
should
science
do.
right now, though, for those viewers out there that have taken all the appropriate steps with the vaccination, the boosters, right now they're current with what anything be the science.
Yes, and they still could get the variant of COVID, but what I've seen personally is a marked difference on how they feel. They're not nearly as sick. I wasn't even going to come, Doc. I had a little cough, and you can tell they've been vaccinated or not. The people who haven't been, because I ask them all when they come in, have you been vaccinated? And the people who haven't, I'm still seeing it, they are much sicker. So you may still get it, but the case will be much, much lighter. But if you haven't been vaccinated, you're sicker. Maybe not hospital sick, but you don't feel well.
Well, every time you come in, I'm smarter after you leave. So you are just a wealth of information, and you deliver it in a way that's very digestible so that we can all understand it. Even somebody like me can understand it.
Well, and I appreciate you, Joe, for giving me a whole one-day notice to prepare everything here so I could come up with halfway meaningful for you. So I appreciate the long.
That's actually.
Did you send me a letter and you recommend?
Yeah, normally
how's your date looking?
we just pull you off the street, though. So this is actually at least 20 hours more than you normally get. So you're just a wealth of information. Sure. As I've said before, you are a treasure in our community, and all the great things that you've done in your profession and all the service work that you do, we can't thank you enough.
Well,
and this has been tremendous, and everybody's impacted with their health, and so.
Sure.
I'm going to give you the last word. Any
well,
final
the last
thoughts?
word, Joe, I've kind of had a tradition of telling jokes here.
Yes, you have.
And
good ones.
And so I have one here.
Okay.
Just to kind of.
Here we go.
So anyway, this is a classic joke. The man brings his dog into the bar. You know it's going to be a good joke when it starts off like that.
It's going to be a good one.
So he puts the dog up on the bar, and the bartender says, "What the hell? Get that dog off the bar." He says, No, this is a special dog. This dog can talk. He said, "Buddy, I've been tending a bar for 20 years. People tell me their dogs talk, their cats talk, hell, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a challenge. I'll give you $100 if that dog can talk. But if he can't, I'm going to toss both of you right out on the street." He said, "Okay." So he puts Fido up there on the bar and says, "Fido." So Fido looks over and Fido goes, "Roof." Fido. Fido goes, "Roof." Fido. "Who's the greatest baseball player of all time?" "Roof." So the bartender grabs hold of both of them and just throws them out on the street. So the dog's out there shaking the dirt off of him. He looks at his master and says, "Maybe I should have said Joe DiMaggio."
I'm Joe Edling for Chat with the Chair. We really appreciate you tuning in and joining us. We hope you like us and share us, and hope you have a great evening. God bless you all.
OCRATIC. Everything you need to know about the Vigo Dem Party. So sit back, relax, and watch from the